Hey, okay, I'm a bit tired, but I think this is an important video to make. If I look a bit tired, I've already tried to upload it and I lost 15 minutes of video, so I'm a little bit annoyed about that. But anyway, I'll try to get straight to the point. Because, like I say, it is important to make this. So I'm going to talk about the so-called "yes means yes" law in California. It's a very controversial law that was introduced by Governor Jerry Brown last year. I'm going to read out the first few paragraphs of a BBC report. It's a bit too long to read the whole thing, but yeah, here we go. This is from, just so to give you a context, it's from October last year. California Governor Jerry Brown signed the country's first affirmative consent law last week, which requires that both parties give ongoing consent during sexual activity. Following suit, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo last week ordered all of state-run universities to include an affirmative consent policy in their sexual assault investigation guidelines. The law defines affirmative consent as a conscious and voluntary agreement to engage in sexual activity. Under the law, lack of protest, silence, or previous sexual history do not count as consent. This yes means the yes law is designed to make consent the responsibilities of both sexual partners, not just the woman, but not everyone on board is on board with the new law. So I'll put a link to that article because it's much longer than that. I just don't have time to read the whole thing. Supporters say that it will make the situation clearer regarding legislation and consent. They argue it will make it a lot clearer, and one analyst, just get her name to be honest, Jenny Kutner of Slate magazine says innocent men are not routinely convicted as rapists, and they will not routinely be convicted as rapists under affirmative consent laws. Now, I don't know the situation in the United States in terms of how many innocent men are convicted versus guilty men, so I don't know how true that statement is. Personally, I believe that whilst there is a problem of miscarriages of justice regarding innocent men, I've always said that it is a mistake to try and argue that every single man charged with rape is innocent. And I think there is a problem with some, let's say, anti-feminists or just some people. They go to the extent of trying to argue that rape isn't a problem and it doesn't exist. It does. You know, there's this sort of cinema image in a sense that rape is a woman being attacked in a dark back alley. In fact, I watched a film last night called Naked, very weird film by Mike Leigh from 1993 about two rapists. Anyway, not to go off on a tangent, but that starts off with the, I guess, stereotype image of rape in a dark alley, and the woman trying to fight off the aggressive rapist. But actually, most legislation would hold that rape is actually a lot more subtle than that in a sense. You know, defining what rape is a huge issue, and I think there's a huge problem with this because anyone who does try to debate the subject is automatically branded as an apologist or someone who condones rape or a proponent of the rape culture. So, for example, just by making this video and raising questions, there are definitely feminists out there who would say that I'm condoning rape. How do you try to debate feminist logic? I'm not condoning rape. I think rape is an appalling crime, but I do think it is legitimate to debate how we define it, and the consent issue is a huge issue. Now, I can understand why this law is controversial. Let's look at the a very important point that was made in one of those paragraphs. Under the law, lack of protest, silence, or previous sexual history do not count as consent. I think this is a very important point. It goes on to read that this is from The Nation, I guess that's a magazine, Michelle Goldberg. Do moans count as consent? How about a nod or a smile or a meaningful eye contact? Well, there's several problems with those points. I'll read that again. Under the law, lack of protest, silence, or previous sexual history do not count as consent. Human beings have different ways to communicate, and the problem I can see with this law is it's treating sex like a normal sort of interaction between two people. I.e., if you're in a coffee shop, say you're on a date, a low-level date, you're in a coffee shop with a girl, and speaking from a man's perspective, and you say, oh, you offered to buy the girl a drink, would you like cappuccino or a latte? It's treating sex like it's the same sort of situation. Like, of course, consent is important. Now, personally, of course, I would always ensure that the woman I was with is happy in the situation. That goes without saying. But the idea that it's sort of this ongoing thing, like, what I would do is sort of be like, are you happy? Are you comfortable? Every so often. But I strongly believe that body language gives a lot away. Now, if the woman is lying there rigid and looking scared, then that is a clear-cut case, and any man with a brain in his head would realise she's not happy. But if the woman is reciprocating, and what I'm talking about is, it's obvious, common sense here, she's got her arms around his body, she's moaning with pleasure, etc. Common sense indicates that she is enjoying it and is therefore consensual. I just see these things as, I think anything to do with regulating what happens in a private room is going to be difficult, because how on earth do you police it? Ultimately it comes down to her word against his. Ultimately that's the only evidence there really is. I'll read it again. Under the law, lack of protest, silence, or previous sexual history do not count as consent. Now that's problematic. If a young man is with a young woman, and let's say for the sake of argument, they've had sex numerous times, the young woman's always seemed to enjoy it. Let's say they are relaxed, maybe they're dancing, whatever, then it sort of descends into they get naked and they're in bed. Now, the young man presumably would think that any man, just saying young is, any man, and then he assumes, well, yeah, we're going to do this again. Now, that's a completely human response, I would have thought. So I can't help thinking this is just part of the feminist war on men. Anyway, silence. Well, again, common sense should be a factor here. If she's lying rigidly and looking scared, and she's very silent, any man with common sense would realise she's not happy, and any decent man would ask her, say, are you happy in this situation? And if she's not, he should stop immediately. That goes without saying. But if she's silenced in the sense of, it could be argued that dialogues during sex ruins the experience. Personally, I'd prefer no dialogue, except the initial, do you want sex, or knowing if it is consensual. But the idea that there should be dialogue during sex, because that seems to be what this law is getting at, that there needs to actually be oral consent throughout sex, not just initially, but throughout sex. Now that seems very sort of, some people have said it's going to ruin sexual experience, and I can understand that. There's religious people that say sex is for reproduction, but many people would say it's for pleasure, and this is going to ruin pleasure in sex. Lack of protest. Well, that, again, how on earth do you define this? Now, I would have thought that any responsible adult woman, because, this all comes down to a question of equality. I would argue that if we're truly talking about equal responsibility, why is all the burden put on the man? And it is. This isn't an equal law. The burden is put 100% on the man. Surely, a woman has responsibility if she's not happy in the situation to say that she's not happy. But by saying that silence does not count as consent, previous history doesn't count as consent, basically you're putting the entire burden on the man. So in other words, if she's not happy but she doesn't say anything, well then it's still rape. She's got no responsibility. She's got no responsibility to say... I would use an analogy. If you're being mugged, you're not going to stand there and just let the mugger take your bag or whatever. You're going to put at least some protest. Now, if they're armed, you might be frightened, but in a crime situation, or in a situation when you're not happy, unless you're frozen with fear, and I think that's a body language issue, because someone who's frozen by fear is pretty obvious. They look scared, you can see it in their eyes. But to me, this law is fundamentally putting the entire burden on the male partner. So automatically, that is insinuating that it's not equal. In other words, men are being treated as responsible adults. Once again, women are being treated as vulnerable children. Where's the equality there? How about her responsibility to be honest, if she's not happy, to say that? It seems grossly unfair that a man could be charged as a rapist, spend years in jail, simply because he had sexual intercourse, and he assumed the situation was okay. You know, it's not a case of he's a violent misogynist who's trying to control a woman against her will. And I have to say, I am concerned with just how far the rape definition is going, insofar as it seems to me we're getting to a point where any sex is deemed as rape. Seriously. And as a man, I don't know if they're going to introduce something similar in the UK, but as a man, frankly, it makes me anxious to ever have sex, because, and maybe that's stupid, because, you know, I shouldn't assume that all women think like that, but this is a case, in my opinion, of the law of big government overstepping the mark. Now, I appreciate there is a need to protect women, and there is a need to punish rapists. But this to me really seems like it's putting the entire burden on men, and there is a lot of grey areas there. Now, that commentator said the law doesn't routinely charge innocent men with rape. That might be true. But she's saying this law isn't going to routinely charge innocent men with rape. But I think it might well do that, because there's very grey areas there. I mean, silence doesn't mean consent. Well, you know, unless he's pinning her down, then what the hell is a man supposed to think? This is expecting men to be mind readers. Basically, that's another flaw. It is expecting men to be mind readers. It's bullshit. And just to be clear here, I cannot emphasize enough, in no way am I condoning actual rape, and what I'm talking about is a man who has sex with a woman, sexual intercourse, knowing, this is a critical thing, that she doesn't want sex. But the problem here is, you know, this is expecting men to be mind readers. I would say, as a man, they should ask more than once, probably, is she happy, to safeguard himself, rather than be falsely accused of rape. But, you know, once again, to me this just seems like the part of the feminist war on men. Jerry Brown and Andrew Cuomo are Democratic liberals, so of course they're going to be sympathetic to the feminist agenda. Yeah, so from my perspective it's just deeply flawed, because it is putting the entire burden on all men. It's not an egalitarian law at all. That's how I perceive it. I'll put the link to this article. So I'd be very interested from my American viewers, what do you think of this law? Especially if you're from California. I'd be very interested to know Californian perspectives on this. And again, I don't want to just hear from men. It would be great if I could hear some female perspectives as well. I mean, as a woman, if you're watching this, do you think it's important that you clearly tell the man throughout sex, I'm not talking about the beginning, but throughout sex, yes it's okay, yes it's okay, or do you think the body language is enough? It seems to me that we need to clearly define this, and I don't think this law is equal at all.